The economics of the future are somewhat different. You see, money doesn't exist in the 24th century.
No money? You mean you don't get paid?
The acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force in our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
The claim that money no longer exists in the Federation simply doesn't hold up. Or rather, there exist far too many social situations that indicate some form of it still exists. Even in the very first episode of The Next Generation, Dr. Crusher purchases fabric at Farpoint Station and has it charged to her account on the Enterprise. And that's putting aside that she could have used the ship's replicator, a device that reorganizes subatomic particles to create objects seemingly out of thin air. Picard's personal chateau, likewise, seems to violate numerous of the franchise's stated ideals and premises. How exactly did his family procure and maintain such an impressive estate in a world of social equality? Not that someone of Picard's social status doesn't deserve a chateau, but the show does convey the idea that people have moved beyond petty materialism. I imagine such properties are still widely sought after, but because one cannot simply replicate a chateau in the French countryside for all who desire it, how exactly does the United Earth government regulate ownership over these highly valued estates? Characters continuously and constantly make references to money and use turns of phrase only applicable to the 80s and 90s. For example, a female colleague in The Measure of a Man, Philippa, propositions Picard with an invitation to buy her dinner.
Picard, call me. You can buy me dinner.
It may seem a petty example, but it indicates the fact that the writers were pushing a narrative for an American audience at a specific time and place. The undertone plays on a contemporary expectation wherein the man buys the woman dinner, and this is supposed to be occurring centuries after sexual equality had been achieved, and money no longer had any meaning. Another example is the episode The Most Toys, wherein the Enterprise purchases 108 kilos of hytritium from Kivas Fajo, a Zabalian merchant who fakes Data's death in an explosion in order to kidnap him without alerting his comrades. Clearly, the Federation has a means of exchange with foreign powers, and individual Starfleet officers have their own accounts for engaging in said foreign commerce. In Parturition, Harry uses his replicator rations to make a clarinet, and Tom, who was recruited from prison by the way, starts a gambling ring with said rations. Yes, this is partially due to the unique circumstances of the crew being lost 70,000 light years from Earth, but it still displays the initial mechanics of a black market. More importantly, it suggests that human nature has not fundamentally changed. Speaking of black markets, as one essay on The Next Generation highlights, quote, in Gambit Part 1, Picard and Riker deal with pirates ransacking archaeological sites for a superweapon. What other possible markets exist for technology? If the Federation has to work this hard to stop fuel and artifact smuggling, and if smugglers will move anything for profit, then the smuggling of valuable information also happens, particularly when even the most closely guarded secrets in history have been susceptible to this vulnerability, unquote. The same essay has more to say about the supposed change in human character. Quote, even a cursory examination of Federation records, and of some problems faced by the crew of the Enterprise, is not reassuring. They show that such criminal activities as smuggling, genocide and retributory mass murder, treason, mutiny, and even Picard's own readiness to engage in deadly bar fights continue to be problems in Federation space in the 24th century. Though numerous instances can be found of these sorts of activities among average Federation citizens, not all of whom are human, it is telling that some involve individuals at the highest ranks of Starfleet. For example, the Pegasus incident in 2358 refers to a mutiny of ship's officers that took place in a Federation starship, unquote.
You were the captain, I was the ensign. I was just following orders.
And if you hadn't, you'd be dead right now along with all the rest of them. Dead because you listened to a bunch of mutinous cowards who were too blinded by fear to see what I was trying to do.
They were brave enough to risk their lives to stop you from violating a treaty the Federation signed in good faith.
There are countless examples of this, but the point here is that once society crosses a certain threshold of size and complexity, the economics of the future become rather unlikely. One might argue that with increased size and complexity, the opposite begins to happen. Regardless, not even the writers could come up with a society that actually operated around the premise they fantasized about. Even Voyager ends up having a murderer on board, Lon Suter, and several episodes are dedicated to how the crew decides to deal with it. Again, nominally the rhetoric in Star Trek is about quote-unquote humanity, but throughout the series, a Eurocentric, or more precisely, an Anglo-American-centric viewpoint is what gets expressed. The writers even pawn off common Anglo turns of phrase as quote-unquote human expressions.
Using conventional means, that would be true. However, I suggest we piggyback our signal on Romulan subspace transmission.
Piggyback.
A human metaphor, pardon me.
Master, I hope we're in the ballpark.
Ballpark? That's an old human expression.
No regrets. That is a human expression.
Yes.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, piece of cake.
Piece of cake. Ram scoop. Argonauts.
A piece of cake, it's an old human expression. It means they'll be easy to fix.
How do you propose to stop them?
What's that human expression? Shoot to kill.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Excuse me?
It's a human expression, Ambassador.
And again, baseball is a rather common theme in Deep Space Nine. Even one of the Ferengi, Ram, becomes somewhat obsessed with root beer, and Quark considers it quintessentially human.
My own brother drinking root beer. It's so human.
And bubbly.
Now, periodically, there is a reference to someone like Sun Tzu in The Next Generation, and in Voyager, Chakotay sometimes shares a supposed Native American intellectual insight, but it's more the exception rather than the rule, and when it does happen, it's often in service to the development of other characters, or it is meant to convey Western liberal values to the audience. In other words, it's not an authentic intercultural exchange or representation of so-called diversity. In effect, the economics of the future are rooted in the idea that America would lead the world into a kind of post-scarcity space utopia. Everyone would speak English, adopt Anglo-historical sensibilities, and give up on material wealth in the pursuit of more noble aims, namely spreading liberal democracy across the galaxy. It is curious that a post-war capitalist America would attempt to produce a seemingly communist-like utopia, although to some extent the prevailing thought was likely that liberalism and free market capitalism would usher in endless abundance while leaving individuals free to pursue whatever they wished. Whatever the case, the economics of the future are probably based on a flawed reading of what happens with post-scarcity. Yes, there isn't actually post-scarcity in Star Trek, but there are utopian levels of technology that, judging by their counterparts today, would probably wreak havoc on society and usher in an age of nihilism rather than a new age of exploration. If the general public could simply replicate most of their immediate needs and then also had access to a virtual reality simulator such as the holodeck, fertility rates would collapse. Very few people would have incentives to do much of anything. Who exactly aside from Benjamin Sisko would spend their time peeling potatoes behind their father's restaurant in New Orleans? Rather than aspire to sign up to join Starfleet and work 18-hour shifts on a vessel millions of light years away from Earth, most people would stay inside replicating junk food and engage in endless interactive porn sessions. Now, perhaps not everyone would engage in this behavior, but it would certainly become an epidemic. Technically, the writers do explore things like holoaddiction with Reginald Barclay's character. He creates his own alpha male simulator wherein all his female crewmates are in love with him, and he asserts physical dominance over his male colleagues. Counselor Troy helps him work through his problematic behavior, but he in fact never fully recovers. While he doesn't devolve into the same toxic fantasies over and over again, a persistent theme throughout the development of his character, especially when he appears in Voyager, is that he relates more to holodeck characters than he does to real people. It's an interesting foreshadowing of what seems to be occurring today with social media and online socialization. I do commend the writers for discussing these themes, but they tended to depict the problem as somewhat minor in scope. Barclay is a member of Starfleet and is supposedly one of humanity's best and brightest. If such elite human capital has trouble keeping itself in check when using such technologies, it's likely that much of Star Trek society would be a cesspit of nihilistic consumption. Perhaps the holodeck technology may be somewhat limited in distribution. I'm sure someone will assert here that it's only aboard Starfleet vessels, but even were that true, there would likely be similar, albeit less impressive technologies available to the broader public. So the same basic mechanics and phenomena would still apply. Consider here the ship's main computer, which seems strikingly similar to a modern LLM.
Computer, freeze. Call up the intelligence scanner, Spock and Romulus. Computer, enhance far left figure and compare.
Computer, locate the electropathic pattern described in medical database 4 Delta 1.
Electropathic pattern located.
The writers all asserted that such technology would augment the cognitive pursuits of society, but in fact, what we see today with such technology is a steady degradation. Students are using ChatGPT to write their papers, and teachers are using it to grade them. Often the entertainment media produced using AI models is a kind of low-effort, unimaginative slop. Will Wilson, the CEO of the AI company Antithesis, recently suggested that, quote, "It's very possible that we're entering a world where very soon any kind of cognitive labor, any kind of reason, any kind of thought, it'll be something that weirdos do," unquote. In essence, Wilson was describing a descent into Mike Judge's idiocracy. Following the Industrial Revolution, physical human labor began to decline, resulting in less exercise combined with a calorie surplus. This in turn led to an obesity and poor physical health epidemic. What some propose is that the AI revolution will bring about something similar, but on the cognitive level. Perhaps just as people go to the gym now to stay fit, people will also engage in a kind of brain development scheme. But there's no denying that there will be a massive bump in the road. Personally, I suspect the ramifications will be even more pronounced. I definitely don't think AI and related technologies will play out in the ways we saw within Star Trek. They will not simply augment and enhance human pursuits, but will actually begin crushing the so-called human spirit and sense of purpose. But that's getting away from the scope of this section. I will simply encourage the viewer to consider here if Star Trek has a rather flawed understanding of human nature, and if its value schemes being spread throughout the public has left us rather unprepared to deal with reality as it actually plays out.